Before we go outside, I want to show you a model of a flower. So flowers have four main parts. They have sepals, which are usually kind of green, and they are below where the petals come out. So that this is a sepal. And then there are petals. You all know about petals. So this flower has 3 petals that are visible, and it looks like one has been removed from the front here. And then inside the petals would be the stamens. So this is a stamen here. It's got a filament, and then an anther that produces pollen. And then, these are the male reproductive organs of the flower. And then at the very center of the flower is typically one carpel. So this is the carpel, and you can see a pollen grain has landed here. And so the top of the carpel here is the stigma, where the pollen lands and sticks. And then there is a style. Sometimes it's a long stalk. This one doesn't have a very long stalk. And then all of this is the ovary. And inside the ovary would be where the egg is. So you can see this is an ovary, and this ovary just has one ovule, and inside the ovule is an egg. So right where my thumb is, that is the egg cell. So you can see this pollen grain has landed up here on the top, and the pollen grain germinates and begins to grow a tube that carries the sperm down to where the ovule is. And then this one is a little bit farther along if we just turn this around. And you can see this pollen grain has germinated, and it's growing this tube all the way down. And so you can see there's a nucleus inside there. And this tube is going to release the sperm nuclei so that one nucleus can fertilize the egg. So the egg and the sperm are going to unite, and that'll make a zygote that'll grow into an embryo. And a seed consists of this ovule. This wall of the ovule forms a hard seed coat, and inside you've got the fertilized embryo, or the fertilized egg will become a zygote, and then it'll grow into an embryo, and the seed is going to be an embryo inside the seed coat. So the ovule forms into a seed, and then the ovary will form into the fruit. So anytime you have a fruit that has a seed inside it, then you know it's a fruit and not a vegetable. So tomatoes are fruits because they have seeds. And so the seeds used to be the ovules of the tomato, and the tomato is the fruit. Here we are in front of the Carl H. Lundquist Community Life Center, and I see 3 examples of flowering plants here. The first one is this tree, and so you can see lots of individual flowers. And if we zoom closer, let's see if I can hold one still, you can see the petals. You can see the sepals are the green, the green leaf-like things underneath the petals. So this flower has 5 sepals and 5 petals. And then you can also see the stamens, which are the male part of the flower, and they're what produce pollen. And you can see them kind of poking up. And then right in the middle of the stamens is the carpel, which is the female part of the plant, part of the flower. So that's one of the flowering plants. And then down here on the ground, here's a flowering plant. So you can see that this flower bud is not quite open. There's one that's just getting ready to open, but the bud itself is not open. And And so that's a flowering. Here's one that looks like it opened maybe a day or two ago. And then, of course, dandelions. It's definitely the time of year for dandelions. A dandelion is a really cool flowering plant. I'm going to pick one, and I will try to show you what's cool about it. So this dandelion is actually a collection of a whole bunch of tiny little florets. And if you pull it apart, which I'm going to have to set down my phone to do it, and then I'll start it up again. So now I've pulled apart this flower a little bit, and you can see here on my finger are examples of two of the individual florets. And so this dandelion is made out of just hundreds of individual florets. And each one of these florets has, if I can get them to not blow away, each one of these florets has an individual petal, but that petal is really a fusion. I'm holding two florets here in my hand, and each one has one petal, and it has both male and female parts, but they're tiny. And then each one of these, once the seed forms, then these little kind of hair-like things will end up forming into the familiar kind of parachute that we are familiar with, and then the whole head will turn into a puffball. So this whole head would turn into a puffball, but it won't now because I've removed it from the rest of the plant. Okay. So once again, here are these trees, and these are flowering crab apple trees, and they are just about to bust open in beautiful red blooms. So in about a week, this tree is just going to be amazing. There's kind of a little low spot on this trail that's a little bit swampy, and this is where I typically find ferns. And I haven't seen any yet, but I have seen these pretty little white flowers. And these are wood anemones. And you can see they've got these look like petals, but according to the Minnesota Wildflowers webpage, these are actually sepals. And then they have just a ton of stamens. I'll see if I can get a good view of this. Just a ton of individual stamens. And then the leaves of these guys, these are compound leaves, so each leaf is actually three-parted. So these are in the buttercup family, Ranunculaceae. And they're just very noticeable and very pretty. Wood anemones. So I saw some flowering plants here, came back here, and then guess what is here? There's a turkey back there. I think it's a little bit frightened of me. It's in the shadows, so I don't know if you can see it. I'm sure it would like to kind of get away. There it goes. See you later, turkey. And here apparently is the turkey's partner. There she goes. So here's a great example of some flowering plants. And these have nice conspicuous flowers. And you can clearly see the petals. My camera does not want to focus on them, but you can see the petals, and then you can clearly see the stamens here, and and then this one in the middle that's a little bit more reddish, that is the carpel, that's the stigma. Oops, I lost lost the view when I was looking at it. So this one in the middle that's a little bit more reddish is the stigma. So I will actually do a little flower dissection bit by bit to show you this. This flower does not apparently have any sepals. It just looks like petals. And there are 6 of them. And so my guess is that 3 of them are actually sepals. So it's got 3 sepals and 3 petals, and they all look just alike. So I'm going to peel off these petals and then see what we have. So I peeled off the petals, and sadly when I did that, I lost some of the stamens, and my phone really doesn't want to focus. There we go. And so you can see now the stamens. Okay, it's just having a hard time focusing. But you can see the stamens. And then if I could just keep my thumb in view, maybe my camera would stay focused on it. And so these are the stamens. And then I'm going to pull these off, and we'll be able to look at just the carpel. So now I have pulled off the stamens, and what's left is just the carpel. You can see the stem at the base and then the carpel. And so at the base of the carpel there is a green ovary, and below that is kind of the stem of the flower. We call that the peduncle of the flower. And then you have that long stalk, which is called the stipe. And then up at the top of the stipe is kind of a rough surface where the pollen would land, and that is called the stigma. And it just so happens that there is a bee over there, and that bee is going to pick up some pollen, or it's looking for some pollen, and it's going to fly from flower to flower, and it's going to help spread the pollen from one flower to another. Unknowingly, it's not doing this on purpose, but the flower benefits from this arrangement because pollen from one flower goes to another flower, and then the sperm cells on the inside of the pollen can be released into the ovule of the flower, and you can get a cross-pollination. And cross-pollination is beneficial because you get more genetic variability when you cross-pollinate than if you self-pollinate. Okay. Here's one more example of a flowering plant. And you can see that this one, the flowers have started to open, and so you can see the petals, and if you look closely you can see the stamens on the inside. I'll try to hold this branch so we can see this. See the stamens and carpels on the inside of this flower. So pretty soon this whole tree is just going to be awash in beautiful pink blooms. Right now there are a lot of these little purple flowers, these violets, blooming. So I'll get close and show you an example of these. These are a type of flower that is not a regular flower, it's irregular. You can see this one has 2 different kinds of petals. It's considered to have bilateral symmetry. And so these are kind of, there's a big patch of them blooming here. Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed our field trip today. Wanted to give you a chance to come back on campus before next fall. And all of us faculty and staff are going to be just so excited to have you guys back. And so we'll just kind of keep on keeping on with all of this social distancing, and hopefully next fall we'll be back on campus. So have a great week.